We're here today to discuss the transformation of the S&S Award into the S&S Theatre Productions company. I'm Terri Paddock, I'm asking the questions today, and I'm joined by the founders of the award, Caroline Underwood and Warner Brown, as well as director and co-producer Jenny Eastop, and Tim Gilvin, who is the wonderful composer who won the S&S Award in 2014 for Stay Awake Jake. So thank you all for joining me here today. Okay, let's get straight into it. So musical theater fans, of course, will be familiar with the S&S Award and what it's achieved. But for those who might not know it, Caroline, give us a little bit of a précis. What was the S&S Award and why did you, when Warner found it?
Well, we started it, Warner and I co-founded it, started it in 2011. And it was really very much about development, the S&S Award, because we felt that there were a lot of opportunities around at the time for musical theatre writers to develop their shows properly. It was always about a workshop with an industry presentation at the end of the week, which meant that basically you spent the week rehearsing for the industry presentation and you didn't really get the work done on the show that needed to be done. So we felt there was an opportunity there to give writers the chance to actually spend a real proper week with a creative team developing their show. And that was the kind of crux of the award. That's the point at which we started. I was chair of Mercury Musical Developments at the time, and we, MMD, stepped in to administer the award for the time that it ran. And what we also did was that Leicester Curve brilliantly came on board, and Chris Stafford and Nikolai Foster offered us a huge amount of in-kind support so that we were actually able to do the week at Curve, which was completely at their, with their goodwill and completely free of charge. And they offered us all their facilities there at the same time. So we all went up to Leicester each time to do the development week. And then on top of that, we did an industry presentation, but it was later on, further down the line, once the development work had been done during that week. And then, of course, to top the whole thing off, we also had a gala where we could invite a load of industry people along, have a lovely evening, showcasing the work of all the finalists and announcing the winner, which was done on various occasions by Michael Ball and Don Black or Janie D and Nigel Harman. So there's a complete package, but the focus of it was the development, and that for us was the really important thing.
Well, I can say that I attended the gala a few times, and it was a very lovely evening indeed, and also just so fantastic to see so much great and exciting musical theatre. I really felt as someone, as an audience member, like you were
thanks,
in at the start of discovering some really new and exciting talent. But so why now introduce the production company, S&S Theatre Productions, and does that mean that there is no longer going to be the S&S Award, Warner?
I think what happened was, I think we were actually a victim of our own success. We were getting entries from America and around the world. It just got too big for us to handle. We built up such a pool of goodwill. We had over 40 international judges, and led by Nika Burns of NYMEX Theatres, Nikolai Foster of Leicester Curve, Kent Nicholson of Playwrights Horizons in New York. It just seemed awful to let that go for nothing. So it seemed that the next progression, the next logical step was for us to produce, and the award had been for new musical theatre writing, and that's what we would produce. The award doesn't continue, I'm sad to say, but the production company has taken its place. So the name continues. It's named after my late parents, Sydney and Sylvia Brown. They were always known as S&S when they were alive. So S&S continues, but in a different guise.
And do you think that they would be pleased that it's now a production company?
My father would. My mother would think we hadn't done enough yet. But
in their name.
In their name, right, yes.
You've got plenty of time to satisfy Mum.
I hope so.
Okay, and the awards, as you discussed, it had very much an international flavor. The US-UK interchange was very important, and I know that that's an important part for the production company. Why is that, and how important do you think is this US-UK interchange for musical theatre more generally, Warner?
I think we very much felt while we were running the award that there was somehow a wider canvas for us to work on. We discussed quite a lot with our American counterparts, and we started to feel that, while there were many areas where we complemented each other, there were also areas where we could learn from each other too. And it just seemed like an obvious progression then for the new company to aim to mount co-productions between Off-West End and Off-Broadway. Also, as Caroline knows, the US is such an important marketplace for musical theatre, and there are many more opportunities there for new theatre. There are many more off-Broadway theatres than there are off-West End theatres. And then when Kent Nicholson realised the value of what we were talking about, we were utterly thrilled, because he works at the very heart, the very core of American new musical theatre writing. He's the producer for new musical theatre work at Playwrights Horizons, which probably, as you know, is the creme de la creme for this kind of thing in New York. And their most recent musical won the Pulitzer Prize. So, we've got quite a lot to live up to. And he was one of our finalist judges on the award. He's the doyen of new musical theatre writing in America. So we were absolutely thrilled when he came on board as co-producer, and, Jenny and Mercurius Theatre having come on board. So we're all there for the London production, then hopefully to carry on off-Broadway afterwards.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to pull in others on that discussion. What, as a director, Jenny, and Tim as a writer, what do you think about this question of the interchange between the US and the UK with musical theatre? How do they differ, and how do they potentially, I guess, complement one another? Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've only spent sort of 3 days of my life in New York in total. So I don't know how best placed I am to answer it, but certainly, if you look at the new musical theatre that's coming out of the States compared to the new musical theatre that's coming out of Britain, we've got a lot to learn about trusting writers, I think, trusting writers to find and tell interesting stories, and not just relying on things that we know are going to sell, and being brave in those choices, and the fact that they do pay off, those brave writer-led choices like Hamilton and like Come From Away and Dear Evan Hansen. Yeah. And
do you follow American composers and lyricists? Do you
Oh yeah.
You do.
Yeah. How can you not, really? I suppose my the musicals that made me want to write musicals are all by American musical theatre writers. So that interplay is definitely undeniable, and exciting to explore. Yeah.
And which ones are they? Can you mention any?
Oh, yeah. Sweeney Todd was the number one thing. As I got into musicals quite late, so I was at university and I was a sort of snobby music student. And I heard the score for Sweeney Todd, and I thought, what is this? Having had my preconceived notion of what musical theatre is, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I was like, I just had it blown wide open that there could be such rich music and such interesting storytelling happening in the musical theatre. And I just had the last 5 years soundtrack on loop, because I was at university and we were putting it on, and I was doing rehearsal piano for it, and again it was the score really that drew me to it. But so
Sondheim.
Terry, let me just interject here, because Tim's the living proof that we're not actually all rubbish in this country, though. We do have so much potential and so much talent in this country as well.
I
think the proof is that we will meld.
Yes. Of course. Well, I'm sure that Jason Robert Brown and Stephen Sondheim also watch very carefully the likes of Tim Gilvin and the talent that we've got here. But Jenny, what do you think about this US-UK difference and fueling one another debate?
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to take what is different about American musical theatre and British musical theatre, and actually complement each other and build on each other and learn from each other. I think musical theatre in the United States is part of everybody's DNA. It's such an integral part of theatre life, in a way that we might say that the classics and text-based theatre is part of the integral DNA of British theatre. So I think it's wonderful to take the skills and the particular areas of expertise from both of those, two centres and see what that brings out, and also play to these different audiences to see how different audiences react to certain parts of the production and learn from that. I think it's a really exciting project to not just start something off and think, oh, if it does a certain thing here, let's hope we can take it, but actually to say this is a UK-US co-production, this is actually going to complement both of those centres and both of those audiences are going to see this. And yeah, I'm very excited about how we're going to go forward with that.
Fantastic. Now, another thing that really, I guess, defines what S&S is about is that you are dedicated to what we say is radical new musical theatre. So it's got to be new, it's got to be radical. Going to what Tim was saying, I suppose, first of all, you know, how are we defining that? How do we define musical theatre generally, and what makes it radical?
Sure. We thought a lot about using the word radical, and we saw that one of the definitions of it was far-reaching. Mm-hmm. And that seemed to sum up just what the new company was about. We just feel that musical theatre is capable of so much more in some ways than so-called straight theatre. You know, in musical theatre, you can go quite easily into somebody's mind. You know what they're thinking in an instant. You can link music and words in a way that expresses emotion on a deeper level. You can reveal, you know, nuances of feeling that sometimes aren't totally possible with just a spoken word alone. So many things. Yet with all these possibilities, we had a feeling that sometimes musical theatre isn't really being stretched to its full potential. And we wanted to open the gateway a bit more for that. It's certainly not being avant-garde just for the sake of it, but it's just trying to stretch the boundaries a little bit and, if necessary, break the mold. You have thoughts, and
yeah.
Caroline.
Caroline, what are your thoughts on that?
We have a view of what radical means. I mean, it's like Warner said. For me, it's pushing the boundaries. It's doing something different. But the thing is, that could be at any aspect of the piece. So it could be the subject matter. It could be the structure of the piece. It could even be the venue it's being presented in. It could be the production techniques you use or the score. So it's really anything. It's a question of pushing the form and doing something different with the form. I mean, radical it's quite a broad. We're applying it in quite a broad way, I suppose. But it could be anything to do with the show at all. That's what it means for me.
But it's coming, and I suppose being surprised, in some way surprised by what you find. But I've spoken to lots of playwrights over the years, and sometimes when I refer to one of their shows that has quite a lot of music in it as a musical, they say, no, it's a play with music. You know, sometimes there seems to be, you know, quite a resistance from some creatives referring to something as a musial.
You know what is terrible? Well, sorry, what is terrible in these little boxes? I mean, theatre is theatre. But why is the subject matter good for a musical and not good for a play? Why does a musical more often than not have to be an adaptation? Plays are rarely adaptations, you know, in general. What are these defining lines? Why, you know, theatre is theatre. Theatre's somebody making a gesture or reading a sonnet or doing a dance or doing a tap number. It's theatre. It defies definition.
Yeah, so you think labels like that, plays with music, it's not helpful?
Hate it.
Everybody's nodding their heads.
Yeah. I think
do you agree, Tim?
There definitely is that aversion to being labelled as musical theatre, and I think if we can be radical in the musical theatre that we create, that's only going to expand the definition of musical theatre, because my opinion is that musical theatre is nothing more than its component parts suggest. It's musical and it's theatre, but there is this preconceived idea of what a musical should be, which I think you know, if we can disrupt that, that's only going to be good.
Hooray.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Well, actually now then, Tim, let's come to you and your connection, as I mentioned, with the S&S Award. You won it in 2014 for Stay Awake, Jake. How was that as an experience for you, and how did it go on to influence your career since then?
Yeah. Well, the experience of getting an email saying you've won was quite surreal, you know, because I entered quite a few of these kinds of competitions before, and I'm like, wow, I've won. So that was really great. But you try and, you know, what is it, 7 years now, I suppose. But I've had a few projects since then, and I'm sort of always interested to try and trace back the threads of one event leading to another event, leading to another event. Everything's always interconnected, but everything also always leads back to the S&S Award.
Yeah.
Because before that, I moved to London in 2011, and before that I was having to sort of, people didn't really reply to emails, and I was self-producing or trying to self-produce and all of that exhausting stuff. Whereas afterwards, I met great collaborators, and I met other people who I could talk to and who knew who I was. So that sort of network expansion was just a huge help. But we talked about the setup of it being more about the development, and that was really helpful as well, because I had my week at Leicester Curve with a great creative team, and there was no pressure to sort of present it at the end. So I was able to spend a few months refining my sort of opening number, or going through different drafts of my opening number before the sort of industry presentation, at which we got offered a slot at the Vault Festival. We had a really good run there in 2016, and Stay Awake Jake has finally come back in December 2020 of all times to put on a theatre show. So we did a live stream at Southwark Playhouse, which you can catch on demand until the end of this week, I think. Which really happily we were able to do in association with S&S Theatre Productions. So that was a lovely full circle moment, and life continues for Jake, I hope. We've got a cast album coming out soon with Ahmed Hamad, who's just a fantastic actor. And yes.
And just tell me. Indeed. And for Stay Awake Jake, so you wrote the music as well. You wrote everything, the music, the lyrics.
I wrote Stay Awake Jake. Yeah, I suppose it's the easiest thing to say.
You wrote it all.
Yeah, I wrote it all. And the other thing that happened with S&S Award is I was able to get an agent who happens to be the lovely Caroline Underwood, who I'm sure would like me to say. I'm sure she'd like me to say that I am music and lyricist. It just sounds like quite a lot. But, yes, I wrote the score, and I sort of humbly say bye Tim Gilvin, but I wrote all three.
Amazing! What a talent! What a talent!
Terry, we can refer back to an earlier question of yours. We were talking about radical. We used to get the final, I think, 10 or something musicals for Caroline and me to judge, and you usually get a musical about Rasputin. We had 20 Rasputin. The usual things we write musicals about. About the fourth one in, I was getting really tired with this, and we just played a bar or two of Stay Awake Jake. We both sort of went, where's this coming from? This is coming from a different place. Yeah. And that's a bit of radical as well, because it was suddenly something, there was a breath of fresh air that wasn't the usual, musical has to be a love story, music has to have redemption, music has to be all these things. Why, and Stay Awake Jake didn't really fit any of this.
Redemption. So for people who haven't seen it, Tim, what is Borna referring to? What is Stay Awake Jake about?
Stay Awake Jake is a one-man.
That's a tough question.
One-man, one-act musical. No, it's all right. I practiced this bit. It's a one-man, one-act musical set in a car. We follow Jake as he drives across the deserted motorways of England at 2 a.m. From London to Carlisle to be reunited with his girlfriend Sophia. And over the course of the hour-long musical, we find out why. So that sort of that exposition just unravels slowly over the course of the journey. And I'm very flattered to hear that it sounded radical. I think I was listening to, I knew it was, because it was one actor, I thought it's going to be piano-led, it's going to be mostly piano. So I think I was thinking about writing an interesting piano part, and maybe that led it to sound more radical, but all I was trying to do was create something sort of interesting and that exists in that kind of liminal 3 a.m. space. But, I wasn't setting out to be radical, so it's really great that it's that it stands out. But
there's another thing that's very different to me about it as well, is your lyric structures. Your lyric structures are not like general lyric structures. I said to Caroline, this is the greatest compliment. I said, he's got too many words for the line. There are too many words, and yet it really works. It really works like a dream. So that's We better stop praising you now. We better shut up now.
I'm just going to keep putting more words in now, Warner.
So now every time I hear the word radical, I'm going to get a picture of Tim in my head. Tim, you are the personification of radical, the embodiment. Wonderful. So another radical I want to hear from, Jenny. Jenny, you and I have known each other for many years. We've collaborated in terms of me helping you promote various projects you've worked on, plays as well as musicals, so much that you've done with your own company, Mercurius. How you talked about the US UK interchange being part of the thing that attracted you to this, but tell us a little bit more about how and why you wanted to get involved with Warner and Caroline, radicals that they are, and S&S.
Oh, yes, well, I first worked with Warner and Caroline when I directed and produced The Biograph Girl, which you did a wonderful marketing campaign for, at the Finborough Theatre in 2018. And I think it's fair to say we really worked very well together, and we really enjoyed working together. And it was actually towards the end of the run of The Biograph Girl that Warner and I had a debrief lunch one day and talked about how much we enjoyed working together and how it would be good to collaborate and work on future projects. And coming from that, moving forward, we discussed several different projects and several ways of getting involved. And one day Warner said, there's a musical that I've wanted to write for quite a while. And so it's been incredibly exciting to be to observe that, to see that grow from those initial ideas and develop in the brilliant way that it has, to now getting to the stage when we're ready to launch that musical theatre that he talked about.
And that's going to be the first staged production from S&S Theatre Productions. So we're going to come on to that in a moment.
Yes, I'm going to say more about it. But that collaboration.
Jenny hasn't told you that the debrief was a 10-hour lunch, but we won't go there.
Well, I do love that, Jenny, you've got wonderful decor in your home there, posters of previous shows, including Pride of Place, your poster for the Biograph Girl.
Yes, I'm very sorry to say I haven't sorted out my lighting at all, have I? I'm sorry that it's got a reflection on it, so you can't see the glory. No, but it was, I mean, the Biograph Girl was one of the most enjoyable things that I've worked on, and certainly this first fully staged production for S&S, which we will launch soon, is, I think, without doubt, one of, if not the most exciting thing I've worked on. And certainly the collaboration has been wonderful so far. And speaking for myself, and I hope for Warner and Caroline, I think we hope that this is the start of future collaborations.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, no doubt about it.
And Warner, now just remind us, the Biograph Girl, when did you originally write that, and who did you write that with?
I wrote it when I was a student at university, and I'm not going to tell you the year, Terry, no matter how much you try to persuade me. So, and I'll just tell you a very quick thing. You may want to just lose this, but it's quite funny. Jenny approached Caroline, I think, about could they do a revival of the Biograph Girl, and I said to Caroline, no way. It's the first show I wrote. It's nothing like the way I'm writing now. It'll fall flat on its arse. It'll just be terrible, But courteous guy that I am, I'll go and have a meeting with the director just to tell her why she can't do it. So we met in a bar, and a lot of our meetings were in a bar. And about 3 hours later, I staggered out and went back to Caroline and said, I've just given her full permission to do it. Absolutely. Because Jenny had such a vision about it that you couldn't say no. And she sort of has such a force of personality that you can't say no anyway. You might as well just say yes. And I'm very, very glad I did say yes. She did a wonderful production. We got amazing national reviews. I'm going to do a Tim Gilvin here. And it was one of the happiest experiences, and it was a beautiful production. So,
and it was a huge hit.
It was, yeah.
It was a huge hit.
Fantastic, yeah, fantastic.
That's what a great director can do.
Tell me about it.
With very good material, obviously.
With very good material.
Dated material, but there you go.
But Jenny, Caroline, it's also great to see with a new project like this, to see two great women who I admire so much, really at the forefront of this project. But you are not the only women involved in this, is that right? Who else is involved? And was that something that you were conscious of, that you wanted to make sure that you had female talent at the planning and execution of this. Caroline, do you want to go first? Caroline.
Oh, I was going to actually let Jenny speak first on this one, because
I'll start off, and then I'm sure Caroline.
As the director.
Yes, we've got Jen Green on board as orchestrator, who's doing brilliant work, and we're certainly hoping to bring on board more women once we've put more of our creative team together. Also, the actual production, I'll be careful not to say too much about it, but the actual production has a cast of 5, and 3 of them are women. And the answer is yes, we are very conscious of this. I think it's something in the midst of the discussions about the 50-50 gender casting that so many theatres have signed up to, and so many of the discussions about gender inequality in theatre. It was shocking actually this time last year when the Sphinx Theatre Company report came out looking at gender inequality in theatre. That they found across all the areas gender inequality was worse than the report 8 years earlier by The Guardian and Pentabus Theatre. The fewer female artistic directors than 8 years earlier. The funding of women-led companies and companies that are looking specifically to work with women is less than 1% of the funding across the board. It's really shocking. So I think it's something that we're all conscious of, that gender bias and gender inequality in theatre. And I think musical theatre is no better in terms of gender inequality than other theatre, both in the people telling the stories and the stories that are told. So it's something that, yes, we'd like to address. Also, the Arts Council strategic plan for the next 10 years talked about inequality of all, all across the board, quite rightly so, and said some very important things about that, but didn't once mention gender inequality. So I think it's something that needs to be at the forefront of everybody. And I will say the production, it's an entertainment, it's a love story, it's a fantastic musical, but at its heart, it's a profound look at the issues of what it is to be human. Of the fundamentals of how to live a life. So I think it's very important for all of us that we open ourselves to the whole diversity of those human experiences of all kinds. And I think I will just go on to say that obviously when we're putting together our creative team and when we're casting, we are, of course, it goes without saying, wanting to find the very best people for those jobs. But we're aware that traditionally opportunities have tended to go towards white middle-class men. So we are going to be consciously aware of keeping our minds open and keeping our eyes open, of looking across the whole diversity of talent to make sure that we really do find the best people for the jobs in every area.
Well, that's great to hear. Caroline, as we mentioned, in addition to S&S, you are also a very successful agent for talented writers such as Tim Gilvin. What perspective do you bring to this in terms of the gender balance in the industry?
What?
Terri, she's also my agent, Terri.
Well, you got 2 male writers on the screen in front of you.
Yeah, 2 white male writers. That's never mind. I'm pleased to say that I also represent quite a lot of female musical theatre writers.
That's very good to hear.
Which is great, and which is something I'm really pleased and proud about. It's funny. I mean, I was previously a music publisher before I was an agent, and have been working musical theatre for many years. And when I started out, you saw very, very few female musical theatre writers, sort of at all. And I've noticed, sort of, to put I hope, positive stance on this in the last sort of five years, maybe a little bit more. A lot more are coming through. I mean, we've still got a long way to go to make it sort of equal across the board. But there are now more female composers, book writers, and lyricists coming through here. I mean, I see that because of people who approach me and people who I represent and people whose work I go and see. And if you look now at writers whose work is being presented at things like Adam Lenson's Signal and those sorts of events, there are a lot more female writers coming through, which is great. I mean, that couldn't be better. I think we need.
I was going to, sorry, you please finish.
No, I was just going to say, I think the one thing that has definitely got to be improved, I mean, obviously more female writers would be great, is the diversity aspect, because they are largely not hugely diverse, but at least it's a step in the right direction that, you know, more female writers are there and breaking through.
And indeed, the S&S Award has celebrated female musical
a lot
writers.
I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, it's actually female writers have been in the majority of winners. I mean,
and finalists.
And finalists. I mean,
yeah.
when we started out back in first award was in 2012. That went to a female male, Denise Wright and Chris Burgess. But then since then, other than Tim, it's been all female. It's been Kate Marley and Alex Young, not all female, sorry, and Claire Mackenzie and Scott Gilmore. So we've had a majority of female writers across the board, which has been great. I mean, I think that sort of reflects how things have changed in the last few years. So
perhaps down the line, you will also be producing female writers. But
so.
I'm sure you will. But the production that we've danced around, your inaugural production, is one that is written by Warner. And what else can you tell us about it, Warner? You are collaborating with...
Yeah, well, we're only being tantalizing about it, Terri, because obviously there's nowhere to place it yet, no chance of having an opening date. So but it's a show, if you like, where we're trying to set the template for this Anglo-American aspect of the new writing. So the music is by Joshua Schmidt, who is kind of one of the leading lights of the current American new musical theatre scene. He wrote Adding Machine, which was done here at the Fimbra, and is simply mind-blowing. And book and lyrics are by me, who's obviously British. The radical bit comes in, I would say, firstly in the score, which is electronica, really original, accessible, but very different and in approach at the same time. The way the piece is structured is fairly radical, I think, and the subject matter, which asks big questions. I mean, really big questions. We have an incredible team already in place. Jenny is directing, and she's fearless about script work and about getting things right. Orchestrator is Jen Green, who's producing sounds like you've never heard. I mean, isn't she just amazing? Musical director is the brilliant Ben Cox, who did Sweeney Todd, The Play Shop, both here and in New York. We managed to get a great workshop just before lockdown, which is fantastic. So when the world comes back to some kind of normal, we're all set to go.
Wonderful. And I can say I've had a sneak peek at this, and and I think it does qualify as radical. Really interesting. I can't wait to reveal the title and the story and everything. It's very exciting.
Next steps.
Yeah. So yes. So have you any idea, Caroline, when and where we're likely to see this show on stage?
Well, what we're hoping, I mean, and it is difficult to plan at the moment, but what we're hoping is Off-West End, in one of the Off-West End theatres, and sometime early next year is our target. It's what we're planning for at the moment. It's the way we're strategizing. So that's probably all we can work towards right now, depending on obviously how things pan out over the next 12 months, I guess.
But starting in London, and would you then take it to the US, to New York?
It's a complete co-production. So the producers here are we three, and a lovely guy called Jeremy Booth, and Nicholson in New York. But we're both producers for both venues. So the production is the production that starts in London and then hopefully goes off Broadway.
Oh, that's exciting for everyone who's going to be involved in that.
I think it's a bit of a unique business setup as well. People normally spot things in London and then take them to New York. They have to be good in London, of course, so but hope for the best.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've talked, we all know what we're all going through at this crazy time. Launching something like this in the middle of a pandemic, it's pretty bold to, you know, a lot of people might have just thought, well, let's just stay quiet about this until, you know, the time comes and then we'll move up. Why did you want to announce now and start talking about it now? Warner, Caroline, who'd like to answer that?
I think the question is, why not? I think if you are bursting to create something, as we all are, it's hard to sit on it. Just bubbles up. And we've all got to have hope for the future of our industry. And if this can be a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, then we'd love it to be so. Very short answer, sorry, but that sort of says it, I think. Jenny, I think that's...
It is really nice to have news, you know, news about things that are coming up. Jenny, what do you think?
Yes, I think absolutely. It's obviously it's a frustrating time because, you know, so much work can't actually move forward to the point that you want it to. But it's a time for creativity. It's a time for excitement. It's a time for looking forward. This, hopefully, let's keep everything crossed, but, you know, eventually we're going to be moving out of this, and that's when people are going to really feel like they need theatre more than ever before. This idea of groups of people gathering together to share an experience is what everybody's missed in the pandemic, and that's exactly what theatre is. I think one thing that COVID-19 has shown us is what social animals we are and how we need to share stories and share experiences. So this is something, you know, constantly looking forward to the excitement of what is going to be possible as soon as we're able to gather together again. So absolutely, now is the time to keep our eyes on the horizon and aim towards that.
I think it's actually given us another thing, Terri, as well. We're all, I think, doing other projects as well, but it has given us a kind of mind space, so that I don't know about everybody else, but I'll sort of wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh my God, there's a wrong line in the middle of page 33, and I've got to write it down and call Jenny in the morning and say, we've got to change that, or there's a wrong stress in a lyric or something like that. And you've actually got that mind space at the moment where it's sort of there all the time, bubbling away in a more concentrated way, I think.
Yeah, I guess there are not as many distractions. So if you have got work that you can focus on.
Sure.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think about that? How have you as artists been using your time in lockdown? Tim, what have you been doing?
Well, I think as writers, we are very lucky because, you know, that's what I've been doing, is I've been going to my piano and I've been playing and I've been writing a lot, and I've had things to write, which has been really nice, and very aware that a lot of people in the industry haven't had that, and are just itching to get back out there. I mean, I'm itching to get back out there as well. But I think, you know, as Jenny said, you know, there will be the demand, there will be the appetite, and that's an exciting, positive thing that we can hopefully hang on to, and also the innovations that have occurred, in terms of streaming, in terms of making theatre accessible for people who maybe can't afford to come to London or whatever. I hope that that's going to continue. So, you know, theatre is going to be different when we come back. Myself and Warner and lots of other musical theatre writers will have so many new musicals, and there should be, I believe that there will be an audience for them. Radical ones. I believe that there will be an audience for them. So, yeah, let's just work to make it happen, I think.
Terri, Tim touched on a wonderful thing there as well. The new forms that are coming out there in lockdown, like streaming and all these things like that. We've been planning for ages to make the new show, the title you don't know yet, our first show. Suddenly, along came the thought of co-producing the live streaming of Stay Awake Jake. Who thought we would have been doing that? But so even before we launched, we were able to put our toe in the water in a kind of new form of theatre, which is radical. I mean, the form of theatre itself is radical.
Yeah. The last live post-show Q&A I did before this was last March, and it was at the Old Red Lion, and it was with the playwright Simon Stevens, which was incredible. It was actually it was a very emotional evening, because it was the Monday when the Prime Minister had said people shouldn't go to theatre, and so all of Salt and West End and regional theatres closed. But then, as you'll know, each fringe theatre kind of had to make a decision: do they keep going or not keep going? And then by the Tuesday, most were realizing that, you know, the weight of public opinion being what it was, they had to shut. So the Old Red Lion had originally hoped to play out the week with their show, and we were meant to have a post-show Q&A on that Wednesday night. And on the Tuesday, the producers called me and said, okay, we actually can only we can get one more performance this Tuesday night, but we feel we need to give it to the company because, you know, so many people, they didn't even know when their last performance was going to be. They could go in on that Monday. So they said, we want to give the company their one last performance that they know is the last performance, and we're going to record it because we were planning to do that later in the run. And Simon Stevens has rearranged his schedule so that he can come in tonight. So can we do the Q&A tonight? I said, yeah, of course.
Sure.
So we went in, and so the audience mainly then was, you know, young theater makers, and it was so emotional, people realizing that this would be their last time to see live theater for they didn't know how long. But Simon made the point, he's like, there's going to be, to what Tim was saying, the writers are going to be using this period, are going to be writing so much. So when it comes back, wow, we're going to have just, a cornucopia of material to choose from. And he said, but there better not be too many plays and shows about life in lockdown. I don't want to see. And then of course, you know, there's this kind of hackneyed reference to whether we know it's true or not, that Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the plague, right?
The plague.
I don't know, but
yeah,
maybe.
Hey,
Jenny, what about as a that's pretty good. So no pressure, writers. You gotta produce the equivalent of King Lear. But Jenny, what about as a director? How have you been using this time?
Yeah, it's of course it's been very frustrating, and but you know, people have had far greater frustrations, I'm sure, than me. But I've had 3 productions cancelled, and Mercurius tried to do another production, which we would have opened 4 days ago, would have been the opening night, and we were hoping for that, and it's been postponed, not cancelled, etc. So it's been a very frustrating time of constantly planning things, or constantly trying to see a light at the end of the tunnel, to put something on, to produce something, to direct things. But it has also given me time to take stock and to sort out creative projects. And I'm normally, you know, running on the spot to try and just keep still in terms of juggling lots of different things. And it has given me that space to try and plan things a little bit better and take stock of the company and the direction the company's going. And I've got, once we're able to get going again properly, I've got a great long list of projects that I can't wait to get going on now, that I've decided, of course, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can develop that. So hopefully people are suffering through this, obviously, but hopefully they're also able to take the time to focus their mind and put things in place, so that once we are slowly able to come back, really people can use all of their creative skills. Let's see.
I think it's going to be a great shock to the system when things reopen and people rush around like mad trying to do so much and cram it all in. But so how are you feeling about the future of, how badly hit has theatre been by this, and how are you feeling about the future now? Who would like to start with that? Caroline, we haven't heard from you in a moment. What are you thinking from the agent
perspective? It's been horribly hit, obviously. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say. I mean, a lot of productions being cancelled and weren't reopened at all, and a lot have obviously been delayed. I think from my perspective, I mean, I'm finding, sort of from an optimistic point of view, that there is quite a lot being planned for this year. And that's been keeping me quite busy in terms of my clients and the agency work. I mean, Tim has several projects on the go, which hopefully might hit the stage this year. That's certainly the plan. Let's see what happens. You've got several things on the go in the same way. And a number of my other clients are the same. So that, from my own perspective, that's been keeping me quite busy. And everything to do with S&S, as Jenny said, it's what's been really good with S&S Theatre Productions is we've really had time to be able to think about how we approach everything, get the website set up properly, get all the social media accounts set up, which normally you've rushed through like crazy, not had time to think about because you're doing so many other things. And it's been very valuable to be able to sit back and really plan it and think about it. And I'm optimistic about theatre. I think theatre will come back strongly. I think it'll come back with all sorts of different work that people want to see. I'm hoping people will just want to rush out into theatres, buy a ticket and just go see things. And it's been very, very hard for a lot of people. And I think that's the awful thing, is how many people have left the industry along the way and how many will return and come back and how many have gone sort of to other things now and won't return. But I hope that everybody's going to be able to hang on in there and it'll be as good as it ever was, if not better, actually.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think? What's your prediction?
I was similar to Caroline. I'm optimistic. As I said, I think the demand is going to be there for stories and communal experiences. I think we'll have work to do and to make sure that, well, Jenny was saying the other day about we can go one of two ways, which is we can continue working towards the stories that we all want to see and that challenge people and excite people, but that are financially risky. And obviously the difficult thing when there's not as much money going around is the easy option is to take the safe route and to do things that we've seen before. And so I think, yeah, it could go one of two ways. Don't know, Jenny, if you want to expand on that, because that's sort of something you said the other day.
Yes, yeah. No, I was just saying, I think theatre is on a knife edge. And I think I want to be optimistic, and I am optimistic, but I think I am worried that a lot of venues and a lot of producers and the industry as a whole, having had such a terrible hit and having suffered so much financially, might find it easy to go down the obvious route of big names, tried and tested production, the same thing that they know that audiences will come back to, and become quite safe for a while. I do think one of the depressing things, I don't want to become too political here, but I think one of the depressing things has been, it's been a wake-up call for theatre and the arts in general to see how little valued and regarded we are across the board. And I think then to go down the safe route of, yes, it's just entertainment to pack people in, will be a very, very dangerous route to go down. And I think the most important thing for us all, but also in terms of how theatre is actually valued in the future, is to start to shake things up and to be radical and to be interesting and to say to people, this is actually about fundamentals of life. This is not just a bit of entertainment once we've done everything else in society. This is actually about questioning who we are and how we live our lives, etc. So let's be radical, let's challenge audiences, let's shake things up. And then I think people will not only come back to theatre and value it and theatre will grow, but also perhaps finally theatre will be properly valued in society.
That's really great. I worry about the habit generally. I'm obviously a theatre goer, but sometimes I catch myself saying that in the past tense, which scares me, which really scares me. But I was reading a fascinating article the other day about how for all of us this experience has changed our brains, and I think that maybe there are a lot of us who have become more agoraphobic, and will now feel strange about going out generally, let alone going to theatre. I hope that those of us who have a habit and those of us who are theatre curious can develop that habit really quickly. That's my hope.
Terri, I'd like to strike a really positive note though here, because we have had to raise obviously a hell of a lot of money to put this first new show, the title of which we're not revealing, and we're not fully there, but we have found enough people who are willing to take a gamble on what is, to use the word again, a radical piece of theatre. It's not eyes and teeth, it's not jazz hands. And although the money has been somewhat difficult to raise, it's not been that difficult to raise. So there are people out there who will put their shirt on something that isn't the obvious choice. And I think that has been very positive, I think, as far as S&S is concerned.
That's really encouraging, and I don't want to end on a negative if that came across that way. I think for myself, I know the first time I go back, I'll think, oh, it's like, you know, first drink of water after you've crossed a desert or something. I quite anticipate wanting to rev up quickly. I cannot wait.
Your first night invitation is in the post, Terri.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay,
sorry, I just wanted to chip in. Sorry, it's probably pointless saying, but it's one of the things I heard people in the first lockdown saying, oh, of course, people aren't getting colds anymore, and you suddenly realise that that people are so infectious, aren't they? And we just go into pubs and theatres and places and don't even think about how, and it's so lovely to be distanced from people and not getting all these different infections. And I feel it's one of the things, at first people were saying, oh, everyone will be wary of gathering again in large spaces. But I think everybody I talk to, and certainly me, the one thing I miss when you're asked, oh, what do you miss? Oh, I miss going to the pub, I miss theatre. No, what everybody really misses is not seeing people as a threat. And I think that's what everybody will really embrace, however much, oh, is COVID, what's happening. But I think people really miss just being able to be around people without worrying and being able to gather without being aware of it all the time. And I think people will just, as human beings, whether it's theatre, concerts, wherever it is, I think people will absolutely embrace just being able to be with people and not feel that they're a threat. I think that's a really positive thing going forward.
Oh, that's amazing. So let's bring it back now as we finish up to S&S specifically. The S&S Theatre Productions it just sounds marvelous, and I'm very excited for everything that you've got planned. But let's just pay final tribute to the S&S Award. The legacy obviously lives on in the production company, but beyond the production company, Caroline, Warner, what do you think? And Tim, as a previous winner, what do you think? What else might be the legacy of the S&S Award?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, Caroline.
I've already mentioned sort of the legacy of I hope of the writers that we've helped sort of highlight and showcase. And I've mentioned them earlier, but
I think we should say what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So because they are all, as far as we're aware, we know what they're all doing. So I mean, Chris Burgess is regularly produced, particularly by Katie Lipson. Scott Gilmore and Claire McKenzie, who won. Chris won with, Denise won with a show called Emerald. Scott and Claire won with Forest Boy, and they have been going great guns in America. They've had a residency at Goodspeed Opera House. They've really sort of worked up their profile in the States, and they are, I mean, they're Scottish writers. They are also very regularly produced in Scotland, and they are starting to make a name for themselves, I believe, in England now as well. And Tim, of course, well, we know what Tim is doing, all sorts of interesting, exciting things, which are hopefully going to hit stage at some point in the next 12 months, which he can actually talk more about, actually, because they're all announced, and almost all announced. And and of course, and our latest winners, the 2015 winners, Kate Marley and Alex Young, they've got a couple of shows in development. They would have had something to showcase the theme last year had it happened. Kate was the Cameron Mackintosh composer residency in 2018 at the Lyric Hammersmith. And they, I know, are going to go on to great things too. So we're very proud of our sort of alumni.
We sure know how to pick them, Terri, don't we?
I was going to say, you obviously have a great knack for spotting talent, which bodes very well.
I hope so.
Let's just hear from Tim again, because you are one of the living legacy.
A living legacy, Tim.
You're a
living legacy.
So tell us about your upcoming project.
Yeah.
Tell us about your upcoming project.
I'll just plug my upcoming project. So I'm working on a musical called Cable Street, which is about the Battle of Cable Street in the East End of London in 1936, when the working class people of the East End of London stood together against the British Union of fascists who wanted to march through the Jewish East End with anti-Semitic propaganda. And they said, "They shall not pass." And that's an epic musical, epic in scope, epic in scale, which has been commissioned by 10 to 4 Productions. Very excited about the future of that one. developing a sort of hip hop musical with Johnny Wright, who's a rapper and book writer, with Perfect Pitch, and that's called Scot Free, and that should be at Northampton later this year. And what else am I doing, Caroline? Oh, I'm working with Brown and Joshua Theatre, who are a really wonderful company, and I'm working with them just as composer, but we did a show in 2019 called Unfortunate, and yeah, frustratingly, that was supposed to be on last year and then Christmas, and then it keeps getting pushed back, but hopefully later this year that will be making another appearance.
And Random Acts of Kindness. But you've got the song cycle as well.
I've got a song cycle. Well, I'm sort of curating. It's a fun job, actually. We've got about 18 or 19 writing groups that have all written a song for a song cycle, which again is in development with 10 to 4 Productions. And I'm working closely with Amy Draper as director dramaturg on that show to sort of bring that to some sort of shape. So yeah, it's a really interesting and unique project, that one.
Caroline, do you realise how much commission you're going to get from him?
Yeah, eventually, hopefully.
Wow, the bank's going to be broken.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, but as we all know, musicals take time.
Well, those all sound great, and lots of great companies that you're working with there. Some really good people behind all of them, I think. So, wonderful collaborators. Okay, that is a lot to look forward to. But let's tell people, Caroline Warner, where can they find out more about S&S Theatre Productions?
As soon as we launch, we have an amazing new website, which is
www.snstheatreproductions.com.
You can follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, you can like us on Facebook.
You can like us on Facebook. We do Instagram. We do it. No,
we do Instagram. Not a lot of Instagram at the moment. It'll be mainly Twitter and Facebook.
But with your help, Terri, we are going to become masters of it. So it's going to be amazing.
But do be sure to check out the website and follow them because as soon as they announce this first show, you will want to know and get your ticket.